Yeah, g'day YouTube. This is Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about splitting Australian hardwood. What is the easiest way? What is the best splitting axe or maul? And go over all of that. We do have the hardest wood in the world. You will hear some reports out there that turn around and say that the Australian bull oak is the hardest wood in the world. It's around 16 kilonewtons on the Janka scale, which is extremely hard. But there is another wood. Now, when we talk about hardest wood in the world, we're talking about the commercial wood that's logged commercially. But we do have another Australian wood that's even harder, and it's called Waddywood. And it's 20 kilonewtons on the Janka scale. So that beats everything. It's non-commercial. A lot of people sometimes maybe use it for knife handles, etc. So, and it's not the easiest wood to find, so therefore it doesn't make it commercially viable to sort of search out that wood, because there's not a huge forests or anything like that. It's in limited supply. So we do have the hardest wood in the world. One thing about having the hardest wood is the grain structure, the fibre structure is very short, but it's interlocking. It can be twisted. It's very knotty wood. That all makes it very difficult to split. If you look at Pinus radiata, it's long fibres, it's not as interlocking, it splits easily. You could split that with anything. Not the case here in Australia. As I've mentioned, it is very difficult to split. So first of all, we'll talk about splitting axes, angles, and in front of you, we've got two sort of pictures of the cheeks. The wedge is flat, or you've got curved, hollowed out cheeks. It is said that this curved out hollow cheeks works a little bit better. And when you put a straight edge against it, you can see that it's got a hollowed out section. Also, with a hollowed out section, it gives you a little bit more variation on the beveled edge here. Typically, this type of shape, and we've got one to show you, is on an est wing. It's about 40 degrees from this point to that point. And also the primary wedge, or the primary angle, is 40 degrees. The secondary angle, which is the beveled angle on the edge, the cutting edge or splitting edge, that's also around 40 degrees, but you can make it a little bit less, but 40 degrees works okay. When you've got flat cheeks like this, you're pretty much limited, because if this is roughly 30 degrees, you can only have virtually 30 degrees minimum on here. Typically you can have this at about 40 degrees, and you can put a little micro bevel on there, about 0.5 millimetre. The beveled edge that's on the est wing is about over 10 millimetres, so we'll sort of go over that. Most of the axes, splitting axes and mauls that all come into Australia, all the wrong angles. Even Cyclone, the manufacturer here in Australia, we've had Cyclone axes probably more than 100 years, wrong angles. And we'll go over that. Anyway, so what we'll do now is just have a look. When you do go to split a log, you are much better off. Now, if this was your splitting axe, you would be better off splitting around the edges. You'll see people that will try and split in the middle. Bang, 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 bang. This is very difficult on Australian hardwood. If this log here was about 2 foot in diameter, I would never attempt to try and split it in the middle if it's made out of Australian hardwood, especially grey box. Grey box is very difficult to split. Now, when we talk about splitting wood, when our hardwood dries out, you can barely put a nail in it. I've tried to put 2-inch nails in Australian hardwood into a fence post, and the nails just buckle over. You're just wasting your time. That's how hard it is when it dries out, and it's, you know, like 10 years old. When it's sawn, it's in excess of around 20% moisture. It's pretty easy to cut. It's pretty easy to work with. The Janka scale works on 12% moisture. So when your timber gets down to about 12% moisture, it's getting bloody hard, and makes it very, very difficult to cut and work with, let alone splitting. And as I said, Australian hardwood has short interlocking fibres, and they can be spiralling, twisted. Very, very difficult timber to split. So just remember, split around the rings and you'll find out that it works a lot better. Also, be careful that when you do split along around the rings, that it doesn't glance off and hit you, because it can be very, very dangerous doing that also. So make sure that you do that. Even if you come in about 2-3 inches, it's probably safer that you don't split, you know, split in about 3 inches on the edge, and that's pretty safe. So we'll look at our first splitting maul. This is the est wing. This weighs, got a head weight of 2.7 kilograms. And when we have a look at that angle here, we'll just see if we can sort of have a good look at this angle. This angle that you see here is 40 degrees. So that is typically what you'll find on a lot of splitting axes. And when you look at the cheeks, you'll see that they're curved out quite a lot. And if you're to hold a straight edge on there, you'll find out that it goes right up to the top here. So we're looking at about 40 degrees there. And the hollowed cheeks are said to also help the splitting process. That's the est wing, very, very popular. It's got a total weight of 4.1 kilograms if you add the handle on there. So the next one is the Fiscus maul. This is extremely popular, the Fiscus maul. It's got a total, its weight is 3.6, so the head weight is 3.6, but it's got a total weight of 5 kilo. The actual angle on here, we'll just sort of get it up on the bench, is 30 degrees. And again, it's not curved out as much, but it is curved. The angle on the bevel is around 40 degrees. It was 50, which I didn't like, and I tended to reprofile this beveled edge to from 50 degrees to 40. I don't like to go, I don't like the beveled edge being greater than about 40, 45 maximum. Some of them are even 60 degrees, way out, totally unsuitable. So that's the Fiscus maul, fairly long handle, around 900 millimeters in length, as was, I just checked that with a tape measure, I think the est wing was 900 mil as well. Yes, 900 mil. The next one that we've got is the Still Oxen Cough, weighing in at 2.5 kilograms. So that's the Still Oxen Cough with a beautiful overstrike protector. Great, one of my favourite splitting axes, this one. It only weighs 2.5 kilo, but with the extra metal here and the handle, we've got a total weight of 3.9 kilograms. The primary wedge has an angle of 20 degrees, and the beveled angle, the secondary, is around 45 degrees, and it was 60, so it had to be reprofiled. Again, I have never seen, only that est wing is the only one that I've ever brought that had a machined edge on it, and no hollow cheeks, flat. That is one of my favourite. It really does work good. It's a great weight and works well. The next one is a Cyclone Super Splitter made here in Australia. You'll notice that it's got really hollowed out cheeks. You'll see these all around the world, very popular, this design. You can see how that's all hollowed out. Now that angle, where the primary angle on that is 40 degrees. So, yeah, 40 degrees there. The beveled angle was more like 60. So, again, I had to reprofile that, and I got it back to about 40 degrees. So, unfortunately, again, it came out with the wrong angle. Now, the most simple design of all, by the way, interesting enough, the length of these splitting axes. Splitting axes tend to be a little bit shorter handle, generally around the 800 mark, whereas the big Fiscus and the Esquing, they're around the 900. So now we've got a block splitter, a Cyclone block splitter. Its handle is 900. This is just a block of metal. It's 2.5 kg head weight, but it has a total weight, with the handle of 3.7 kilograms. It has a 30 degree main angle on it, the wedge. That's 30 degrees. And it's got a very small secondary bevel on it, it's only about a millimetre. It's very hard to see, of about 40 degrees. So this is our Aussie brand Cyclone. These two really do work well. I've got a total of about 30 mauls, but these are my favourite. These are all my favourites. It's very, very difficult to say. I can't pick one over the other. So when I do all my splitting, I generally pick one of these five. Only the Estwing comes with a machined razor sharp finish. Now that's the other thing. You'll read up on a lot of things on the internet that will turn around and say that they don't need to be sharp. Well, that's just hogwash. Can you drive a nail into timber if it was blunt? Makes it a lot more difficult. An axe, a splitting axe or a maul will penetrate the timber a lot easier if it's sharper. It's as simple as that. It's like any type of instrument used to cut wood, penetrate wood. An arrow, even an arrow. Any instrument used to penetrate something, like wood or an arrow, will penetrate the sharper it is, and provided it's got the correct angle. If you've got a very broad angle, it'll make it much more difficult to penetrate. I've brought block splitters, and the worst block splitter that I brought came out of China. Brought it at the local hardware store Bunnings here in Australia. It was 108 degree angle on it. Well, I can tell you all as that was like a rubber hammer. It was just bouncing off the timber. And that's the whole problem. You have to, if you're not capable of putting or changing the edge on the splitting maul or the splitting axe, don't buy it if you can't change the edge on there. Try and make sure it's got the right edge. As I said, the Estwing comes out of the factory perfect. The Oxenkoff from Steel doesn't. It had about a 60 degree angle on it. It made it, and I can tell you from experience, I don't like going any more between 40, 45. That splits the wood good. Start getting up to around the 50s and 60s. It is getting very, very difficult, and you need more energy on our Australian hardwood. It'll work fine on Pinus radiata. On all your soft timbers, you'll get away with 60 degrees. But you certainly won't get away with 60, 70, 80, 90 degrees on Australian hardwood. You need the lesser angle that you've got on the secondary bevel, the main edge here. The lesser the angle, the easier it penetrates. But because of the design of the primary angle, sometimes you can't get below the angle that you need. Plus also, I tend to probably stick to slightly in the higher region of the angle, because once you take the metal off, you can't put it back on. So I give myself a little bit of a buffer. I can take more off this, so I tend to sort of take minimal off it, try the axe out. If the axe doesn't perform really good, I'll take a little bit more off, but I certainly don't go in and try and get this down. This main wedge here is only around 20 degrees. The primary wedge is 20. I could make this 25 degrees, but I'd have to take a lot more metal off. I'm hesitant to do that, because the next time, if this axe gets damaged, the edge, because that can happen with any axe or maul, or that it can get damaged, you'll find out that then I will take a little bit more off. Now, the only other thing that I would say, that if you actually did take any notice, that the splitting axes generally have a much wider blade than the mauls. The mauls, if you're to measure that, and we can actually measure that, and I'm sure it's going to be, we'll just open this up. It's 115 millimeters in width. Now, if we were to look at the maul, and we'll just measure that, and I think it's pretty sure from memory it's only around about 65 millimeters. Yeah, look, it's just maybe 60. It's just on 60 millimeters. So typically these mauls, this is 60 millimeters, and the Fiskars was, I think, probably 75. Close to 80. That's closer to 80 millimeters across there. Whereas you look at the Est wing, that's probably going to be closer to 100. 110. Whole idea of the block splitter with the shorter, if we actually have a look, with the width being shorter, whole idea with the being shorter and the extra weight gives it that extra brute force to penetrate the timber. So that's the whole idea of a block splitter. Block splitters are generally much heavier. Typically, your splitting axes generally go from 2 kilos up to about 2.7 kilos, and your splitting mauls can go from 2.5 kilos up to about 3.5 kilos. Typically in that range. You've got 6-pounders, 8-pounders, if you talk imperial. And that's pretty much it. So just to briefly sum up, we do have the hardest wood in the world, the eucalypt. It's short fibre, it's interlocking, it's twisted. Some of the eucalypts, like stringy bark, are much easier to split. Red gummers are a lot easier to split, but certainly iron bark is a little bit harder to split. And one of the hardest that I find to split, especially when it dries out, is grey box. It is very, very difficult to split when it starts to dry out. Now, I do have a hydraulic splitter. I do use that to do most of my splitting, but I do enjoy getting out there and using the splitting axes and splitting open some timber. So I hope this information helps for any of the Aussies out there that are splitting timber. Just remember that you need to split around the edges first. So, you know, you could split here, split here, split here, split there, then split in a bit. Don't try to go in the middle unless you've got stringy bark. Now, I have split stringy bark in the middle. So all these splitting axes and mauls that I've shown you will split logs like this in the middle if they're around about 1 foot. But if they're a little bit bigger, say 1.5 foot to 2 foot, rather than split in the middle, I'll split around the edges. So I hope that information helps. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. And I do appreciate the comments. So if you're an Aussie out there and you're splitting wood and you've got some problems with your mauls or your splitting axes, drop us a line. And if you're not too familiar on how to measure that edge, we can give you some pointers. Typically, if you want to measure, get yourself one of these little mechanical protractors and you can measure the angle here. So this is really good to measure that beveled edge. Really good because it's very, very small. Whereas the digital one that I've got here, this is great to measure the primary angle, the main wedge, because of how large it is. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.